Thank you for tuning in to the Helium Radio Network. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
We're live here at the Miami Book Fair, powered by Life Improvement Radio. NeilHaley.com for more information, or at Twitter, at TotalTutor, and many different social media sites. You can friend me even at Neil S. Haley Facebook, because I'm not completely full, ready to clear out some of these friends because, again, Facebook doesn't allow you for your friends to see it, and some friends aren't interested in me anymore. So I'll make new friends. But I continue to enjoy our guests. This is the 8th year, Eric, covering the Miami Book Fair. Can you believe it? We met in 2011, and now we're sitting here in 2019, 8 years. And I thought it was 10, so I was dating myself all throughout the pre-interviews leading up to the book fair. But it's been a wonderful 8 years, and all that stuff is available at lifeimprovementradio.com, right? Every season. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Every year, we actually are. We have a new parent network, heliumradio.com. So you can go to heliumradio.com, click on podcasts, and you'll see all the years there. And I thought it was 10 years too, but that's okay. We'll make it 10 years here in the next few. So I'm looking forward to getting into our next interview here with David.
And Life Improvement Radio's 10th year anniversary is coming up, right? Correct?
No, we've already passed. We're working on year 11. So
okay,
actually, we've already just passed our 11th year, which was September.
Yeah, December 6th will be 10 years. I had radio broadcasting networks. All right, so I'm excited to welcome to the program David Maraniss. He's the author of A Good American Family, The Red Scare, and My Father. David, thanks for calling. How are you?
Great to be with you. Good. Nice to be in Miami, out of the cold.
All right, so we are going to go right to the important meat of the story, kind of leading us into why you've written the book and looking at the bio. One of the things I wanted to talk to you start out with is, again, you're an associate editor for the Washington Post, and you did a bio candidate for Obama for the Washington Post in 2008. Did that kind of lead into why you wanted to write this book in certain ways?
Well, I've written, this is my 12th book. I've written 4 major biographies of Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Vince Lombardi, and Roberto Clemente. In writing those books, one of the things I kept thinking about was that I started out each book where they were strangers to me, and by the end, I knew more about their families than they did. That's because most people don't have a biographer going back to find out what really happened with their family. And I was thinking about that I decided, well, I haven't even done that with my own family, and my family has a very profound secret or point of departure for it that I wanted to explore more, and that was when my father was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee and fired from his job and blacklisted for 5 years, which had not really been talked about in my family, so that's what I wanted to pursue.
And it's a different story. Like, in a shout out to Pittsburgh against David with the Roberto Clemente. I just had to bring that up because, again, tremendous man and just tremendous story for sure, David. And I'll have to definitely check that out. But going into just writing it in this perspective versus those other bios perspectives, was it a challenge for you at all to kind of dive deep into that compared to somebody else's life in a way, with meaning diving deep into your family and compared to others? I
tried to use the same methodology in reporting the story, researching the story, interview as many people as I could, go to the archives to get documented evidence, going to the places of the story. In all of those ways, I used the same methodology, but it's inevitable that when you're exploring parts of your own family, that it has a deeper psychological, personal, emotional meaning to it.
Most definitely. And that's something that is interesting. So with all these different, sites like Ancestry.com and different things like that, tell us specifically your kind of research, how you got started and said, I'm going to get started.
Oh, well, it's not like that. I mean, it's much deeper. In terms of archival materials, the National Archives in Washington is where I found all of the files of the House Un-American Activities Committee, including the hearings in Detroit where my father was called to testify, and there was a file on my father in those archives. And my father was the editorial editor of the Michigan Daily, the college newspaper, in the 1930s when he was radicalized. And so luckily all of those old newspapers were digitized by the Bentley Historical Library in Ann Arbor right when I was doing the research, so I was able to get those there. My uncle fought in the Spanish Civil War as an American who went over along with about 3,000 other young men to fight in that war against Franco and Hitler and Mussolini. And those documents were at the Tamiment Library at New York University, along with other places. My father was the commander of an all-black unit in World War II, and luckily for me, he wrote a few hundred letters to my mother about that experience, which I'd never seen or read until I was researching this book. The chairman of the committee that called my father un-American was a Georgia segregationist who had been a member of the Klan as a young man and had been involved in a lynching, and many of those documents were at the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, Georgia. So I went to Spain to trace my uncle's route in the Spanish Civil War. It's primary research and going there where the book takes me that where I get the information for my books.
Absolutely. I knew that you would do it in a little bit more of a detailed way, but just mentioning how popular those things are. Go ahead, Eric.
No, I'm just saying it's really interesting. I was curious to know if, obviously I think your father has passed, and did he have a chance did you guys discuss any of this when you were a child or talk about any of it before you did your research for the book, or was it strictly just a discovery mission on your own? One
of the points of the book is that it was something that wasn't talked about in my family. My father survived that period after 5 years of blacklisting, had a very successful career as a newspaper reporter and editor after that, and really put it behind him and was reluctant to talk about it while he was alive. He lived to be 86 and had a very successful life, but it was not something that he was comfortable talking about. And I wasn't going to write this book while he was alive because of that. So the answer is no. We never really had a profound or deep discussion about that experience when he was in the crucible for those years during the McCarthy era.
Wow. And that's
has it changed your perspective?
When you did the research of looking back at McCarthy and all these different things and what happened to your father, how did that make you feel once you looked into this deeper and looked and wrote this and researched?
Well, I'll tell you one profound moment, which was when my father was called before the committee in Detroit. It was all congressional hearings are recorded, and there was a transcript of that hearing. And in that transcript, which I had read years earlier, my father had said, I have a statement I'd like to read to the committee about what it means to be an American. And the chairman of the committee denied him the right to read that statement. He would have been allowed to do it if he had confessed to his sins and sought absolution and named names, which he refused to do. So that statement was buried to history until I went to the National Archives decades later, 2015, from 1952 to 2015, and looked at his file, and there was the statement. And it's a profound 3-page document that really defines his belief in freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and what it means to be an American. But what struck me first about it was just its physicality on the page, because my dad was an old Hunt and Peck typist, like a lot of newspaper guys, a bad typist who was constantly Xing things out on an old manual typewriter, and the keys would stick. And the first line says, Statement of Elliot Maraniss, and the S in statement jumped up a half space, as it often did in those old typewriters when the keys would stick. And it was seeing that imperfect S where everything sort of washed over me about what it must have been like for my father during that period. It sort of brought it back to life for me for the first time. After all of those decades where I'd known him but not really felt what it could have been like for him then. So that was really an emotional experience that carried me through the writing of the book.
Wow. Yeah, Eric, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were hitting the question. Go ahead with your question.
That's okay. You answered. That was my question. So, I mean, it had to be really powerful for you. And have you gotten any feedback from other family members?
Yes. Some family members were reluctant for me to write the book, and all of them now feel that I did our family right by this book. I've also, more importantly, probably gotten more personal letters from people around the country and the world whose families endured something like this, or a family secret that was revealed later, or the difficulties of being hounded by the FBI or the House Un-American Activities Committee during that period. Just so many personal connections, letters of people that thanked me for writing about that era and describing what they had endured.
Did your father change his ideology and thought process after all that scare in certain ways? And once you said he had
yeah. By the time I knew my dad, he taught me never to fall for any rigid ideology and to search for the truth wherever it took you. So he learned his own lessons from that period. And, there are times when I was reading his editorials in the Michigan Daily and shaking my head and saying, "What were you thinking, Dad?" I understood his idealism that motivated him, but I also saw the naivete of some of his beliefs.
Wow, what a life lesson. It's very interesting. My father just passed a couple of months ago, and he worked for Admiral Rickover and all these different things, and I wish I had all that history when he was work in the Navy and, pretty high up working for Admiral Rickover. I need to get somebody to ghostwrite, to write a book on that and to research my father in that way. Because that's the powerful thing of learning your history of your father. You start to kind of really understand who you are as a person.
That's right.
Through your father.
That's a good point. I think that this book had more of a profound effect on my understanding of myself than anything I've done.
And it's always hard. Well, I don't know when your father passed, but it's always hard to think about that loss. And I saw the new Mr. Rogers movie, and I was tearing up the whole time, and I never would have put up to a movie like that because of it. Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, to myself, it's got to be a pretty profound moment, pretty powerful, to write this book. Obviously you've written tons of bestsellers. Is there anything you want to do after this? I mean, this is kind of, I think, probably the most profound book to you. You said it made the biggest impact on you. Do you have any?
I keep writing. I mean, that's what I do. My next book is, I've just started the research. It's about 3 years off, but it's going to be a full-scale biography of Jim Thorpe, the Native American athlete.
How about that? So I can see there's a sports in you, David, with some of the biographies of really high-level people in politics to athletes. So those are your two favorite areas?
Pretty much, yeah.
I have to talk to you, bring you on to talk about Roberto Clemente. It's always good to bring back all that stuff. What was the reason for Roberto? Were you ever in Pittsburgh in that time?
Roberto is my favorite player and the coolest athlete I'd ever seen. Even though I grew up in Wisconsin mostly and with the Milwaukee Braves of Henry Aaron, I had felt some special connection to Clemente. And then, so when I was writing books, I thought maybe I wanted to write about him, but what drew me to him was that he was, most athletes sort of diminish as human beings as their talents do, and Clemente was the opposite. He was a great humanitarian, and along with all of his baseball skills, and it was the power of him as a human being that drew me to the story.
One thing we talk about looking at someone's bio, writing someone's biography, is the strength of especially because they were successful people in a specific way. What do you pinpoint as leaders of all these people you've written books on? What qualities do they have?
Well, they're very different people. Obviously, if you range from Bill Clinton to Vince Lombardi, but what they all have in common is a will to achieve. In various ways it shows itself, a will to prevail, a will to show the world. A lot of these famous people came out of nowhere, especially the ones that I've written about. And so I would say that will is the separating, along with skill, but will is what drives them.
And some sacrifice too, right? For sure.
Oh, absolutely. Sacrifice is part of will. It's overcoming the obstacles no matter what.
And that's the thing about it. Now, looking at your father versus those people you talk about, what qualities do you think they shared? That was a shared ability of your quality of your father compared to those others. Now, you talked about each one of them, but let's just
I would say the strongest characteristic that they all have actually was optimism. My father endured a lot, but maintained an optimistic perspective throughout it all and throughout his life. And I think that a certain optimism is necessary as well.
Well, David, again, it's something that I'm sure you never dreamed about, that you write something about your family after you've written books and biographies of such successful, unbelievable, amazing people that have ranged. But I'm sure you feel this is one that is for the books for you, right? Of the books you've written, to kind of say, hey, this is one I always will look back to of writing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, books are like children. You don't want to separate one from the others, but this one has a more profound personal meaning. Absolutely.
All right, David, best place we can find information on you, purchase your book, and learn more about you. Where can we go?
My books are available at bookstores and on Amazon and every other possible online place, but you can go to my website, which is davidmaraniss.com, one word, Maraniss, davidmaraniss.com, and it has a nice display of all my books and how they can be purchased.
All right, fabulous. Thank you for calling and appreciate you coming on the show.
Okay, thank you both. Good talking with you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You're listening to the Neil Haley Show, powered by Life Improvement Radio, live from the Mind Book Fair. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for listening to Helium Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and should not be construed in any way as advice from Helium Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, and editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the express written consent of Helium Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.